Okay, so today we're gonna start off with section A. We're gonna start with the front of the truck. So the first thing we got, top lights. So our top lights are up here. The orange ones. They should be properly mounted, working condition, not cracked, not broken, and missing, amber in color. We then have our headlights. Headlights, properly mounted, working condition, not cracked, not broken, and missing. Then we have our indicator turn signals. Our turn signals, properly mounted, working condition, not cracked, not broken, and missing, amber in color. And we have a look under the truck. So for this one, you're gonna have to lean down. Nothing hanging, nothing leaning, not leaning from side to side. Leaning from side to side could mean a flat tire or a suspension problem. Now we go to the engine compartment passenger side. On this side, I have two belt-driven components. So you're gonna pop your hood up. I have two belt-driven components. My first one is the alternator. This is the alternator. It should be properly mounted, working condition, no bends, breaks, cracks, or illegal welds, missing no bolts. The electrical wires running from the alternator, they're these right here, these back here. These are the electrical wires. Good working condition, no cuts or burn marks, away from hot engine parts, and properly insulated. We then have our fan clutch. Our fan clutch is in here. This is our fan clutch. Properly mounted, working condition, no bends, breaks, cracks, or illegal welds, missing no bolts. We then have our fan blades. So our fan blades are these. Properly mounted, working condition, not cracked, broken, or missing. We have our belt. This is the belt. Right here. Properly mounted, working condition, no cuts or frays, no more than 3/4 of an inch of play. We then go with our hoses. So this is our hose. Hoses over here, here. Properly mounted, working condition, no bends, breaks, cracks, or illegal welds. No holes, cuts, bubbles, not leaking any fluids. We then have our washer fluid reservoir. This is our washer fluid reservoir. Properly mounted, working condition, not cracked or broken, not leaking any fluid, not missing any bolts. Cap properly secured. Check daily to make sure at proper level. Lastly, on this side, we have our electrical wires. So our electrical wires here, and electrical wires over here. Properly mounted, good working condition, no cuts, frays, burn marks, properly insulated, away from hot engine compartments. Now we go to our driver's side. Come on to this other side. On this side, I have one belt-driven component and two gear-driven components. So this is our water pump. This one right here. Belt-driven, properly mounted, good working condition, no bends, breaks, cracks, or illegal welds, missing no bolts, not leaking any fluid or water. We then have our air compressor. Our air compressor is back here, so it's not visible. But it should be gear-driven, properly mounted, good working condition, no bends, breaks, cracks, or illegal welds, missing no bolts, not leaking any air, not making any funny sounds. Attached to the air compressor is the governor. It should be properly mounted, good working condition, no bends, breaks, cracks, or illegal welds, not leaking any air, not making any funny sounds, and missing no bolts. We then have our power steering pump. It's also behind here. It's not visible, but it's gear driven, properly mounted, good working condition, no bends, breaks, cracks, or illegal welds, missing no bolts, not leaking any fluids. We then go with our oil fill. So this is the oil fill right here. Properly mounted, good working condition, no bends, breaks, cracks, or illegal welds, not leaking any fluid. The cap needs to be properly secured, but also easy on, easy off. We then have our oil dipstick. Properly mounted, good working condition, no bends, breaks, cracks, or illegal welds, not leaking any fluids. Cap needs to be properly secured, but also easy on, easy off. We have our water coolant over here. Our water coolant, properly mounted, good working condition, not cracked, not broken, not leaking any fluid, not missing any bolts, cap properly secured. Check daily to make sure at proper level. Lastly, we have our power steering reservoir. So this is our power steering reservoir. Properly mounted, working condition, no bends, breaks, cracks, or illegal welds, missing no bolts, not leaking any fluid, cap properly secured. Check daily to make sure at proper level. Now we go with the steering linkage. So our steering column, which is this. Properly mounted, working condition, no bends, brakes, tracks, or legal welds. We then have our steering boot, which is plastic right here. This is the steering boot. Properly mounted, working condition, no cuts, tears, or rips. We then have our steering box. This is the steering box. Properly mounted, working condition, no bends, breaks, cracks, or legal welds, missing no bolts, not leaking any fluid. We then have our pitman arm. This is a pitman arm. Properly mounted, working condition, no bends, breaks, cracks, or illegal welds, missing no bolts, secure with the castle nut and a cotter pin. We have our drag link, so this is the drag link. Properly mounted, working condition, no bends, breaks, cracks, or illegal welds. And lastly, we have our steering arm. Our steering arm is this one right here. Steering arm, is that? Properly mounted, working condition, no bends, breaks, cracks, or illegal welds. Secured with the castle nut and the cotter pin. Now we go with our suspension. So for suspension, this is our hanger. This is the hanger right here. Properly mounted, working condition, no bends, breaks, cracks, or illegal welds, missing no bolts. And we have our leaf springs, which are these. These are leaf springs, properly mounted, working condition. No bends, breaks, cracks, or illegal welds, none missing. Now we have our U-bolt and shackle. So our U-bolts are right here. This one and this one. They have a U shape. So that's properly mounted, working condition. No bends, breaks, cracks, or illegal welds, missing no bolts. And lastly, we have our shock. Our shock is right here. Be properly mounted, working condition, no bends, breaks, cracks, or illegal welds, missing no bolts, not leaking any fluid. Okay, now we go to the brakes. So we got the brake hoses and lines. So these are the brake lines. Properly mounted, working condition, no cuts, bubbles, tears, not leaking any air, not making any funny sounds, and properly insulated. We have our brake chamber. This is the chamber. Yes. Properly mounted, working condition, no bends, breaks, cracks, or illegal welds, missing no bolts, no loose or missing clamps. And we have our push rod and slack adjuster. This is our push rod and slack adjuster. No more than 1 inch of play. Properly mounted, working condition, no bends, breaks, cracks, or illegal welds, missing no bolts, no more than 1 inch of play. Then we have our brake drums. Our brake drums are in here. Should be properly mounted, working condition, no bends, breaks, cracks, or illegal welds, no residue buildup. Minimum of 1/2 alive. And we also have our brake pads in here. Las balatas, properly mounted, working condition, no bends, breaks, cracks, or illegal welds, no residue buildup. Minimum of 1/4 of life. Now we go with the tire. So the tire properly should be inflated to manufacturer specifications. The specifications are written on the tire. Must be originals, no recaps or rethreads. No cuts, rips, bubbles larger than 1 inch, and minimum thread depth of 432. We then have our rim. Properly mounted, working condition, no bends, breaks, cracks, or illegal welds. We have our airstream valve down here. Properly mounted, working condition, no bends, breaks, cracks, or illegal welds, not leaking any air, not making any funny sounds. We have our lug nuts. So these are lug nuts. Properly mounted, working condition, no bends, breaks, cracks, or illegal welds, all present, no rust or shiny threads. Those are indications of looseness. And lastly, we have our axle seal. This is the axle seal. Properly mounted, working condition, not cracked, broken, or leaking any fluids. And that's it for section A. Now we go to section B. So our section B starts from here. We got the mirror. Properly mounted, working condition, no bends, breaks, cracks, or illegal welds. No more than 10 inches away from the cab, fully adjustable to driver's view, and no illegal stickers. We then have our door. Properly mounted, working condition, opens and closes properly. And we have our door hinges. The door hinges are here. Properly mounted, working condition, no bends, breaks, cracks, or illegal welds, no rust. We have our depth tank. Properly mounted, good working condition, no bends, breaks, cracks, not leaking any fluids. Check daily to make sure it's at proper level. We have our steps and stairs. Properly mounted, good working condition, no bends, breaks, cracks, or illegal welds, missing no bolts, free of any debris or any slippery substance. Now we have our fuel cap. Properly mounted, good working condition, no bends, breaks, cracks, or illegal welds. Secured with the safety chain and the rubber seal. Now we go to the catwalk area where we have the fuel tank. So this is the fuel tank. Properly mounted, good working condition, no bends, breaks, cracks, or illegal welds, missing no bolts, not leaking any fuel, and not filled to more than 90% capacity. We have our fuel tank straps, so this one and this one. Properly mounted, good working condition, no bends, breaks, cracks, or illegal welds, missing no bolts, must have a rubber seal to prevent metal to metal contact. And then we have our the exhaust. The exhaust is right here. And the exhaust. Properly mounted, good working condition, no bends, breaks, cracks, or illegal welds, no residue buildup, pushing all toxic fumes away from the cab. We have our catwalk area. Properly mounted, good working condition, no bends, breaks, cracks, or illegal welds, missing no bolts, free of any debris or any slippery substance. Now we have our battery box. So it should be properly mounted, working condition, properly secured, connections are all tight, cell caps present, no residue buildups or corrosion. And the cover has no damage and is secured. And then we have our frame. This is the frame. Properly mounted, working condition, no bends, breaks, cracks, or illegal welds. Lastly, we have our drive shaft. So our drive shaft is right here. Okay. Should be a properly mounted, working condition, no bends, breaks, cracks, or illegal welds, missing no bolts, and properly lubricated. All right, now we go to the second axle where we have lanes and hoses. So the second axle, the lanes and hoses, they are right here.
Brake lines, right?
Yeah. So they're these. These are brake lines. So like
they're not gonna make you
holding
touch
into
them
the changer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then we have our chambers. So the chambers are these here. This is the chamber. Yeah, dual brake chamber. Otherwise, everything is the same. When we have our push rod and slack adjuster. Push rod and slack adjuster is this one here, behind the chamber. So push rod and slack adjuster on both sides. This is a push rod and slack adjuster. Then we have our brake drums in here, and the brake pads too.
Can you say same as first axle or this?
Oh.
You have to say the same, right?
Yeah. Then we have our hangers. So this is our hanger on the second axle. Then we go to the leaf springs. Our leaf springs are these here on the second axle. And we have our U-bolt and shackle. These are the U-bolt and shackle, this one and this one. We got our shock. Our shock is back here. This is the shock on the second axle. And lastly, we got the airbag. The airbag is supposed to know. Both are airbags. So this is our airbag, and we got another airbag over here. Now we go back to the tire section. So for the tire section, we start off with the tire again. Same as the first axle condition, same except dual tires. They don't have to be originals, can be recapped or rethreaded. Needs to be 4 inches of space between them, free of all debris, and depth 232s. And we have our rim. Same as first axle, the airstream valve right here. Then we have our lug nuts. Lug nuts. And lastly, the axle seal. Okay. Then we go to, that's it for section B. Now we go to section C. We're gonna start off with the trailer. We got the top lights. So the top lights are up there in the corner. They should be properly mounted, working condition, not cracked, broken, and missing, amber in color. We then got the headboard. So this is the headboard. Properly mounted, good working condition, missing no bolts, no holes or damages that would put me out of service. Now we go to the side of the trailer. So for the side of the trailer, we got the whole side. So this is the side of the trailer, this whole thing. It should be properly mounted, working condition, missing no bolts, no holes or damages that would put me out of service. We then have our reflective stickers, properly mounted, working condition, must be present. So reflective stickers. Now we go to the floor bottom where we have the floor. The floor is down here. So the floor is the wood. The wood. It should be properly mounted, good working condition, no holes or damages that would put me out of service. And then we have our bridges. So these are the bridges. These. Properly mounted, good working condition, no bends, breaks, cracks, or illegal welds. Now we go with the landing gear. So for the landing gear, properly mounted, good working condition, no bends, breaks, cracks, no illegal welds, missing no bolts, and fully raised. So this is our landing gear. Now we have our boot and support frame. The boot is this, and the support frame is this. They should be properly mounted, good working condition, no bends, breaks, cracks, or illegal welds, missing no bolts. We then have the release arm. This is the release arm. So it should be properly mounted, good working condition, no bends, breaks, cracks, or illegal welds, missing no bolts, functioning properly in both in high and low gear. When not in use, properly secure so it doesn't cause a hazard. Now we go to the third brake axle. So for the third axle, we got the brakes. We got the lines and hoses. So the lines and hoses, it's these and these. These are the lines and hoses for the third axle. We then have our chambers. So this is our chamber 1, and then we got chamber 2. We got the push rod and slack adjuster. Push rod and slack adjuster are that one. It's behind the chamber.
Right here.
And then we got the other one back here. Push rod and slack adjuster.
Right here.
Is that right there? Now we have our brake drums.
Right here.
Brake drums.
This one
And then the brake pads in there. Now we go to the hangers, suspension. So for the suspension, the hangers on the third axle, this is the hanger. We then have the leaf springs again. The leaf springs are these. These are the leaf springs. And we have our U-bolt and shackle. So our U-bolt and shackle are this one, and then the second one over here in the back. Both the U-bolt and shackle. And lastly, we have our torque rod. Our torque rod is this one here. This is the torque rod. Okay. Now we go with the wheel area. We start off with the tire. The tire should be same as second axle. The rim is this one. The airstream valve, the lug nuts, and this is now called the hub seal. Now we go to the rear of the trailer, where we got the top lights, the red ones. Properly mounted, working condition, not cracked or broken, and missing, and red in color. We then have the door. So the door is all this. Properly mounted, working condition, opens and closes properly, no holes or damages that will put me out of service. Then we have our lock. This is the lock. It should be properly mounted, working condition, no bends, breaks, cracks, or illegal welds, missing no bolts. Lastly, we have our safety latch. This is the safety latch. It should be properly mounted, working condition, no bends, breaks, cracks, or illegal welds, missing no bolts. Now we have our rear lights. The rear lights are down here. Properly mounted, working condition, not cracked, not broken, and missing, red in color. Lastly, we got our DOT bumper. This is the DOT bumper. Properly mounted, working condition, no bends, breaks, cracks, or illegal welds. Now we go on to the last part. We got the coupling system. We got the airlines. Red is emergency, and the blue one is service. This one over here. Properly mounted, working condition, no cuts, rips, tears, bubbles, not leaking any air, not making any funny sounds, properly secured to the glad hands. The glad hands are over here. Must be secured onto here. Red and then the blue one. Then we got our electrical line. It should be black or it could be green. So our electrical line is this one. It's right here. It should be properly mounted, working condition, no rips, tears, cuts, bubbles, supplying power to the trailer. The black or green electrical line goes in here. Now we have the apron. So the apron, properly mounted, working condition, no bends, breaks, cracks, or Leo welds. The apron is basically this whole base. This board.
Platform, right?
Platform, yeah. Now we have our fifth wheel. The fifth wheel is this. It should be properly mounted, working condition, no bends, breaks, cracks, or Leo welds, missing no bolts. There should be no light or space between the skid plate platform of the top of the fifth wheel. So when the trailer is on top, there should be no light in between this and this and the board.
The apron, right?
And the apron.
Gotcha, boss.
Now we have our release arm. So our release arm is this one right here. It should be properly mounted, working condition, no bends, breaks, cracks, or Leo welds, missing no bolts. We then have our safety latch down here. Properly mounted, working condition, no bends, breaks, cracks, or Leo welds. What the safety latch does is it leaves it in this position, in the open position. Now we have our mounting bolts. Our mounting bolts, this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, this one. So what's holding on the fifth wheel. So they should be properly mounted, working condition, no bends, breaks, cracks, or Leo welds, missing no bolts, no rust or shiny threads. Those are indications of looseness. We go to our kingpin. The kingpin. The kingpin is this one. This is the kingpin. It should be properly mounted, working condition, no bends, breaks, cracks, or Leo welds. And lastly, we got our locking jaws. Properly mounted, working condition, no bends, breaks, cracks, or Leo welds. Functioning and closing around the kingpin to hold in the place, properly lubricated. So our locking jaw is this one.
Inside there?
Yeah.
Gotcha. If I pull that,
So it's
does
in
it
there.
move it?
No.
Pull them up.
And that's it for the end cap. For the pre-trip.
So the